Yes, members, good morning.
Good morning.
Yes, this is Teacher Busura Joseph. I'm taking you through history paper 3. Last time, of course, those who attended know me because we started last week and we had an introduction to this very person you see on your screen. This person is known as Napoleon Bonaparte, and he ruled from 1799 to 1815. Now, briefly, of course, I'm going to review what we looked at last week. We looked at this very person you see on your screen, Napoleon Bonaparte. We looked at his background. I remember telling you he was born in 1769 at Ajaccio, in the island of Corsica, in the Republic of Genoa in Italy. Okay, I think you've heard he was born at Ajaccio, on the island of Corsica, in the Republic of Genoa in Italy. Now, one would ask himself or herself that if he was born in Italy, how then did he become the leader of France? This man, yes, was the leader of France. Why? Because he was born a year after the island, that is Corsica, had been taken by the French. I've told you this man was born in 1769. Yes. So the island was taken by the French in 1768. That is why Napoleon Bonaparte was born a Frenchman. And for that matter, he was in a position to rise to positions of great importance in France simply because he was a Frenchman by birth, though an Italian by nationality, right? So we looked at all of this information. This was the background, the introduction. We looked at it, and at least I've gone through briefly what we looked at in our introduction. So we started in Napoleon's other factors that led to Napoleon's rise to power. Of course, we have so many factors, but at A level, we break down the factors. We look at a factor and then we break it down into sub-points. So we started with the French Revolution. So the French Revolution was a factor that contributed to Napoleon's rise to power. We all know the French Revolution took place in 1789. Yes. And this French Revolution greatly contributed to Napoleon's rise to power. We looked at the different sub-points of how the French Revolution contributed to Napoleon's rise to power. Briefly, to talk about the French Revolution, you know, it is a revolution that overthrew King Louis XVI. King Louis XVI was overthrown by the revolutionaries in 1789. Now, the revolutionaries organized themselves into three different governments. And the first government of the revolutionaries was the National Assembly government. The National Assembly government that was formed by the revolutionaries in May 1789, because it is in May 1789 that these revolutionaries decided to call themselves a National Assembly, most especially the third group of people in France. If I'm to remind you, France was divided into social classes. There was the first class, the second class, and the third class. Now, the third class of people composed of mainly the peasants and the educated class. Of course, some educated people were not part of the first and second class. So the third class, I'm telling you, organized itself and in May 1789 decided to overthrow the government of King Louis XVI. So they formed the first government known as the National Assembly government. Now, the National Assembly government was succeeded by the National Convention government. And of course, all these were governments of the revolutionaries, the National Convention government. And then the National Convention government was also overtaken by the Directorate Government in 1795. So those are the three governments we are talking about. Now, my point here is Napoleon worked with the different revolutionary governments. He worked with the National Convention government. He was not yet the leader at that time. And he also worked with the Directorate Government. So as an officer in the army of the revolutionaries, Napoleon so much came to light. I mean, the different governments brought in Napoleon to light. Okay, so we looked at all of that information the other time with those that attended my class. A moment, let me see. Okay. I thought someone is saying something on the chat. Okay. So we looked at all of this information. We looked at all of this information that the French Revolution overthrew Louis and the ancient regime, hence bringing the Bourbon rule to an end. Anyway, we looked at all of that information. We are not going to waste a lot of time there. So I've been reviewing what we looked at. We looked at all of this information. Remember, I told you we break down a point. So what you see now here is a breakdown of the French Revolution as a point, a breakdown of the French Revolution as a factor that contributed to Napoleon's rise. To breaking it down, the French Revolution. All of this information breaking down the French Revolution. So we looked at all of this. We looked at all. And we also looked at these questions here. But of course, I can go through these questions with you, those who were not with us last time. I can also try to help you understand these questions you see here. Now, there is question 1, as you can see it there. The question goes, to what extent was the French Revolution of 1789 responsible for the rise to power of Napoleon Bonaparte in France? Now, I think you can see that question very well. The question is asking a French Revolution contributed to Napoleon's rise to power. Now, what does this question need? This question, first of all, is a two-sided question. The question wants a learner to look at two sides. For example, you look at the contribution of the French Revolution, and then you also look at the contribution of other factors. Yes, what the French Revolution did towards Napoleon's rise to power, and then you also look at other factors. Now, in most cases, we tell our students, when the question asks you to what extent, this question wants the student or a learner to give a stand. You tell the examiner the extent. Somehow you've not answered the question right. So you need to give the extent to which the stem contributed. And what is the stem in this case? The moment we cite a factor and we ask you to the extent to which it contributed, that factor becomes a stem. So here we are looking at the French Revolution. The French Revolution is now the stem factor, a factor that contributed to the rise of Napoleon Bonaparte to power. And in most cases, we want a learner to exhaust that stem. Now the stem I'm talking about is the French Revolution. Give us a lot of information about that stem, about that factor that is quoted. Okay. Now, after giving us a lot of information about that factor that is quoted, then you have to go ahead and tell the examiner that, however, there are some other factors apart from the contribution of the French Revolution. So after looking at the contribution of the French Revolution, then look at other factors. But how do you do that? You don't have again to waste a lot of time exhausting these other factors, because the emphasis was on the stem, that is the French Revolution. After looking at the contribution of the French Revolution, then these other factors, you don't waste a lot of time exhausting them. You state a factor, tell the examiner how it contributed to Napoleon's rise to power, then you relate it to the question, all that. I mean, that is all. You don't have to look at a lot of things when you're looking at other factors. So have you got to that point? I mean, that question number 1? You unmute and tell him whether you've understood.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, that's good. If you've understood that.
Yes.
Okay, now you mute now and we proceed. Okay. Now there is this other question here, question number 2. Okay. Question number 2 is telling us, again, question number 2 is looking at the contribution of the French Revolution. Though it is a different phrase, we've phrased it differently. We've started with these inverted commas, and we are actually reading the question. Without the French Revolution of 1789, Napoleon would have died a common man. Discuss. Again, this is a two-sided question, a question that requires a learner to give a stand also. And the question is saying, without the French Revolution, Napoleon would have died a common man, meaning that Napoleon wouldn't have risen to power in France. Therefore, that means you give the contribution of the French Revolution, and then after giving the contribution of the French Revolution, then you look at other factors. By the way, before I proceed, before I continue from here, there is a question that confuses our learners. There is a question which asks about the French Revolution, and this is how it is phrased. To what extent can we refer to Napoleon I as son of the French Revolution? To what extent can Napoleon Bonaparte I be referred to as son of the French Revolution? Now that question confuses the learners, and the learners think that question is asking for the contribution of the French Revolution to Napoleon's rise to power. Never. That question is not asking for the contribution of the French Revolution to Napoleon's rise to power. Rather, it looks at what Napoleon did and his foreign policy. You cite out what he did that was similar to what the French revolutionaries wanted, to what the French revolutionaries also did. You understand? You look at what Napoleon did in comparison to what the revolutionaries wanted. If Napoleon did something that was in line with what the revolutionaries wanted, then he becomes the son of the French Revolution, because he did something similar to what the revolutionaries did. Now, after looking at what Napoleon did, similar to what the revolutionaries wanted, then you look at how Napoleon deviated from what the revolutionaries wanted. Now, that becomes the other extent of the question. Okay, you look at what Napoleon did, how Napoleon deviated from the objectives of the revolutionaries. Now that becomes the other part of the question. So the first part of the question looks at what Napoleon did and was in line with what the French revolutionaries wanted. Then the however part of the question looks at Napoleon's deviation from what the revolutionaries wanted. So I think I've exhausted that, and I want us to go to our lesson today, right?
Yes.
Yes. You had a question?
Yes.
Oh, okay, good. Now let us look at so that was end of lesson 1. Now this is lesson 2. Now lesson 2, we are looking at, remember, we are looking at factors for Napoleon's rise to power. And the first point was the French Revolution. Now, point number 2 is the weakness of the Directorate Government. Okay? The weakness of the Directorate Government. One would like to know what was the Directorate Government. I've briefly talked about the Directorate Government when I was beginning this session. I remember telling you that the revolutionaries had 3 governments. It was the same, they were the same people, but they kept on changing their governments. They started with what we call the National Assembly Government. The National Assembly Government was replaced by the National Convention Government. Okay, and the National Convention Government was majorly under the leadership of Danton, Marat, and Robespierre. But Danton and Robespierre, we normally refer to them as bloodthirsty leaders. That one you must have been told by the teachers when you were looking at the French Revolution. Now, we also had the third government, and the third government was the Directorate Government. This government came into existence in 1795. Okay? It came into existence in 1795, and it replaced the National Convention Government, which came into power in 1793. Okay? So the other government, okay. Now the point is someone please mute your microphone, whoever has unmuted. So we are saying that the Directorate Government also had some weaknesses, and the weaknesses of the Directorate Government greatly contributed to Napoleon's rise to power. So why was it called the Directorate Government? It was called the Directorate Government simply because it was led by directors. It was led by directors, and there were supposed to be 5 directors. Okay, but among the 5 directors, there was one director that had a supreme please mute your microphones. Okay. So I'm saying that among the 5 directors, there was a supreme director, and he was to be replaced by other directors after 1 or 2 years. Now, so I've told you that it was called the Directorate Government because it was led by directors. Now, here we are looking at the Directorate Government. The statement is, the Directorate Government rose to power after the Reign of Terror in October 1795 and lasted up to 1799, when it was overthrown by Napoleon Bonaparte. It was characterized by the following weaknesses. So I've told you that the Directorate Government came into power in 1795. And it replaced the National Convention Government. Okay. Now it lasted up to 1799, and in 1799, the Directorate Government was ousted by Napoleon Bonaparte in his successful coup at a place known as Brumaire. So we are saying this government had a lot, okay, of weaknesses, and these weaknesses contributed to Napoleon's rise to power. Okay, now here we go with our first weakness, and it goes: the directors were men of mediocre talent and little political experience. Their government was inefficient, characterized by corruption and bribery, and government failed to solve the challenges of the time, which left the French discontented. Full stop there. The political vacuum created by this government needed an efficient leader, who came in the person of Napoleon Bonaparte. So the point there talks about how the directors were men of mediocre talent. The directors were men of mediocre talent. Okay, they were not so wise. They were in between there, so they could not handle national issues very well. So we are saying these people had little political experience. Okay, their government was inefficient. There was a lot of corruption and bribery. You understand? And at the end of the day, we are saying the leaders, the directors failed to solve such challenges of corruption, bribery, inefficiency, you know. And the French looked at any person who comes in to save them from such a government. So they were like, if someone comes in to save us from the Directorate Government, and indeed there Napoleon was. You understand? Indeed there Napoleon was. Napoleon came in to save the people of France from the weaknesses of the Directorate Government, from corruption, from bribery, from, you know, all that. And 1799 was the right time for Napoleon to take over. And in 1799, Napoleon actually was coming from Egypt. He had gone to carry out a campaign. He was sent to Egypt by the directors. Those who are with me last time, I talked about the Egyptian campaign. But in 1799, Napoleon was through with the the Egyptian campaign. He landed back. He came back to France, and when he landed, okay, a moment. Okay. When he arrived in France, okay, he was enthusiastically welcomed by the masses. And when he looked at that enthusiasm of the masses, actually Napoleon is believed to have said that I have come at the right time. Yesterday would have been too early, okay? Tomorrow would have been too late. I have come at the time when the pea is ripe. That was Napoleon. So we are saying he came in at a time when the French citizens, when the French masses needed him so much to save them from the corruption, to save them from the bribery, to save them from all the challenges of the Directorate Government. Am I clear? Is the point okay with you? Before we continue?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yes, it is.
All right.
Yes,
Good.
yeah, it's clear.
Okay.
It's
Good.
clear.
So if all right. So if the point is clear with you, then we are moving over to point or to sub-point number 2. Remember, we are looking at the weaknesses of the Directorate Government. There it is. So the point is, the Directorate Government was extravagant in public expenditure. It set up a large army which needed a lot of money for maintenance. Which led to overtaxation of the masses, thus increasing discontent of the masses and unpopularity of the government. So here we are concentrating on that word extravagant. The directors were extravagant. The directors were enjoying a lot of privileges at the expense of the masses. The directors set up a very large army and they needed a lot of money to maintain the army. And where was the government going to get the money from? Automatically, the government resorted to overtaxing the peasants, to overtaxing the masses. Now, when you talk about overtaxing, you are reminding the people of France of what they went through during the reign of Louis the 14th, Louis the 15th, Louis the 16th. You understand? I believe some people call this man Louis, but I don't think it should be pronounced that way. We are talking about Louis, not Louis. So I don't want you to get lost. So Louis the 16th so much overtaxed the masses in France. And to make matters worse, this man was taxing the peasants. You understand? He was taxing the peasants. The peasants paid a lot of taxes. The taille, the tithe, the bientien, and so many different, the hard tax, the salt tax, and all those ones. But the peasant was earning too little. At the end of the day, half of the peasant's salary went into taxes. The government could take it all. Now, the moment you talk about taxation, you are reminding the French masses of the old days of the old days of the Bourbon monarchy, of the old days of the monarchy, where they suffered a lot. So the moment they taxed the masses highly, the masses had to look at an alternative leader. And the alternative leader was Napoleon Bonaparte. So the moment Napoleon Bonaparte came in 1799, and he talked about taking power, he was supported by the different groups of people. He was supported by the Council of 500. Now, the French Parliament was divided into two, the Council of 500 and the Council of Elders. The Council of 500 was under the leadership of Lucien Bonaparte, Napoleon's brother. So the Council of 500 supported Napoleon so much when he said that I'm going to take over power. The military, the army supported him so much. So the point is, Napoleon was so much liked simply because he had come to deal with the unpopularity of the Directorate Government. So I believe that point is also clear with you. Is it okay?
Yes, sir.
Yes, it's okay.
Okay, good. So we are moving over to this other point. There it is, and it goes. The directorial regime was characterized by insecurity as a result of internal revolts, which led to the hiring of Napoleon to suppress the revolts. This made Napoleon famous at home, leading to his rise to power. So we are talking about the Directorate Government and the insecurity at home. There was a lot of insecurity. I will tell you the Directorate Government, in fact, it was the National Convention Government earlier. The National Convention Government, the moment it took over power, there was a group of royalists that wanted to overthrow the National Convention Government, and Napoleon was hired to suppress the royalists. And that incident was named the Whiff of Grape Shot. It gave a lot of popularity to Napoleon because it is the young Napoleon that suppressed that one. Now, after the National Convention Government, the Directorate Government came in. It also had the same problems. People were attacking the Directorate Government. Now, there was a leader of the socialists in France, the Socialist Party in France, and this man was known as Francois Barbieu. Francois Barbieu. Now, Francois Barbieu is spelled like this: Francois. Though some people, pronounce that as Francois. It is Francois. So Barbieu is Babeauf. So Francois Barbieu wanted to overthrow the Directorate Government. And the Directorate Government used Napoleon to deal with the Francois Barbieu. Francois Barbieu's coup was stopped by Napoleon Bonaparte, and then all this was making Napoleon popular to the French citizens. And that is why by 1799, the French masses welcomed Napoleon to overthrow the Directorate Government. So I believe you've got to the point. He talked about the internal problems, internal insecurity, and how the government was hiring Napoleon. The hiring of Napoleon was only bringing him to surface, was only making him popular. And indeed, by the time he said, "I'm taking over power," everyone was like, "Yes, this is the right man." So have you got that one before we look at another point?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yes.
All right. So let us also look at this other point. This is the point. Yes. It goes. The same government was also faced with many external wars, such as the Italian and Egyptian campaigns, which were also commanded by Napoleon. These also exposed Napoleon's military and leadership abilities, thus helping his rise to power. So we are talking about Napoleon and the Directorate Government and how the Directorate Government faced external wars. Now, in these external wars, the Directorate Government used Napoleon. The Directorate Government gave Napoleon. Okay, the Directorate Government sent Napoleon to Italy to deal with the Austrians in Italy. Napoleon did not go to Italy to fight the Italians, no. In the Italian campaign of 1796, sorry, is someone saying something? Okay, if you are not saying something, please. Okay, let me see. If you're not asking, mute. Okay, we've gone back. Okay, a moment, please. Okay. I'm saying that Napoleon was sent to Italy in what we know as the Italian campaign, not to fight with the Italians, but to fight the Austrians out of Italy. And Napoleon did this very well. Napoleon reached Italy and he talked to the Italians. I remember those who were with me last time I talked about how Napoleon was a very good orator. When he reached Italy, he told the people of Italy that I've not come to destroy you. I've not come to take over your power, your independence. I've come to give you your independence. In fact, he told them, it is believed that he said that people of Italy, the French Revolution comes to break your chains. Greet it with the confidence and your culture will be respected. Now, when the people of Italy had such information, they were like, yes, this is the man. The man has come to break our chains. And of course, the chains Napoleon was talking about, he was talking about the influence, the domination of the Italians by the Austrians. He told them, here I've come to chase the Austrians out of Italy, and then I hand over power to you. But of course, that was not the right thing. There was something at the back of Napoleon's mind, because after chasing the Austrians out of Italy and after making them sign the Treaty of Campo Formio, in which they agreed that we've lost the power in Austria, Napoleon divided Italy into two, southern Italy and northern Italy. He gave northern Italy a new name, and that was the Caesopine Republic. The Caesopine Republic was directly taken by the French and controlled by the French. You understand? So the thing is, yes, Napoleon went to Italy, he fought the Austrians out of Italy, and he brought some gains from there. The French benefited from that because they were now controlling the northern part of Italy. That was still Napoleon. He was becoming popular. You understand? He was becoming popular. So the thing is, let me try to look at this person who wasn't muted. A moment, please. Someone is, let me try. I'm actually not seeing this person. Okay, let us go back to our information. But I've told you that Napoleon defeated the Austrians and the French benefited from that. That made him popular. Now, there is also this point of the Egyptian campaign. Napoleon also went to Egypt. In Egypt, yes, I can say Napoleon lost, but at the beginning, he defeated the British, because Napoleon was sent to Egypt not to fight the Egyptians, but to fight the British from there. Now, for so many years, the French wanted to fight the British, but the British could not be fought by the British and the French. Why? Because they had the strongest navy in the world at the time. So the French tried so much to fight the British and they couldn't. So they thought they can only fight the British and suffocate their commerce in Egypt. They went to Egypt to fight the British from there. Of course, the army was under the command of Napoleon. Napoleon at the beginning was in position to defeat the British at Port Alexandria, yes. But of course, Commander Nelson, who commanded the British forces, reorganized this army and defeated Napoleon. But the point is, the moment Napoleon defeated the British at the beginning, you know, the French were like, yes, that is our boy. That is our boy. They did not want to look at the other, defeat at Malta. No, they were like, no, the boy has defeated the British, at least for once. So the point is, all these were making Napoleon popular. And all these campaigns were campaigns of the Directorate Government. So Napoleon became popular simply because the Directorate Government did not see that by sending him to such campaigns, he was only becoming popular. So I think you've got that point also.
Yeah, we've got it. Yes.
All right. Right. So we are moving on to other point. Moving over to this other point. And here it is. A moment. Unfortunate. Okay, I've seen that. Okay, I think I've now sorted this. Yes, let us. Oops. Okay, but we are explaining that the first point up there. So we are saying that the Directorate Government failed to control inflation, unemployment, and other socio-economic challenges. The government presided over a poor economy with the low levels of production and high levels of poverty, which led to discontent among the masses and favored Napoleon's rise to power. Now, when you look that point there talks about inflation. The point talks about unemployment. And these are what we refer to as socio-economic challenges. Now, so many French citizens could not afford the necessities of life. Why couldn't they afford the necessities of life? The prices of essential commodities were high. If I'm to remind you, when you go back to the French Revolution, looking at the costs of the French Revolution, you must have been told about the march of women to Versailles, or Versailles. I know people call it Versailles, okay? The march of women to Versailles or Versailles. Now, in the march of women to Versailles, or before the march, we are asking ourselves, why was there a need for women to go to Versailles? The reason why the women had to go to Versailles, the prices of essential goods were high, most especially the price of bread. The people in France could not afford bread, and bread was their staple food. Now, time came when women had to go to Versailles to at least talk to the king to help them reduce the price of bread. Now, you remember, among the women that went to Versailles were men clad in women attire. I think you were told that. Now, these men were to assist the ladies just in case the king was to send them the royal guard to suppress them. Now, the question again is, why was it that, why is it that it's women that had to go to the palace? The point is, when there is famine, when children are hungry at home, they look at the mother. So the price of bread was high. Children could cry to their mothers, we are hungry, we need bread. So the ladies had to go simply because they were the ones that so much had the feeling of their children crying for food. And again, the hunger cries of a woman can easily be heard by the leaders. That is the reason why women had to go to Versailles. But of course, you know, reaching there, Marie Antoinette, the wife to the king, came out and uttered a statement that was not good to the people that had gone there. They went there to tell the king reduce the price of bread, but Marie Antoinette, before the king came out, told the masses that, hey, why are you here? They told the queen that we've come here to at least tell the king to reduce the price of bread. Marie Antoinette, the queen, told them, if you cannot afford bread, try cakes. Yet cakes were so much expensive compared to bread. You understand? So we are saying it was not the right statement to be uttered by such a person in that position. And at the end of the day, the challenge continued. Prices kept on rising even after the overthrow of the king. The Directorate Government faced the same challenge of prices rising, and the Directorate Government could not do anything, meaning that the people could not afford the necessities of life. So people had to rise up against the Directorate Government in supporting Napoleon Bonaparte. So we've also talked about unemployment. So many people were unemployed. So many people had left the village to urban areas looking for jobs, and they couldn't be employed. In a town there was what we call open urban unemployment. You understand? People have left the villages to the urban centers looking for jobs, and they cannot find the jobs. So at the end of the day, the masses were like, no, enough is enough. I think we should support Napoleon Bonaparte to help us take over from this inefficient government. So I believe that point is also clear. Yes. Okay. Now, if that point is clear, then let us look at that other point, number 2, which came with, there is that other point that I've not actually talked about. And the point is the directors were divided and lacked harmony among themselves as they disagreed very often on minor issues, which left their government weak. So we are looking at divisions among the directors. We are saying that directors could not sit and agree on what policy to take. One director could be having a different opinion, another one a different view, another one a different view, yet they were the leaders of the country. So the moment these leaders are divided, they cannot do anything for the masses. They were like not in a position to lead the people. If you remember one of the political philosophers, I think that was, anyway, okay, there was a political philosopher who actually said that I would rather be ruled by one lion than 100 rats, meaning that 100 rats cannot decide. Here we are saying that directors were like these rats, they couldn't decide. So the man was like, I think it is better to be led by a lion because a lion decides, but rats can't decide. So here we are comparing the directors to the rats which couldn't decide, yet they were the leaders. You understand? So that divisions among the leaders of the country greatly contributed to the weakness of their government and led to the coming in of Napoleon Bonaparte. If that is clear, then we have this one also. It goes, the government failed to solve the problems of the church, leading to religious discontent in France. Napoleon promised to put religious issues right, thereby winning mass support for his coup in 1799. So the point talks about how the Directorate Government failed to solve the problems of the church. The problems of the church started way back during the course of the French Revolution. You must be remembering the civil constitution of the clergy. If you remember the civil constitution of the clergy, the church's land was taken by the revolutionary government. That bishops were to be paid by the revolutionary government. They were even to be appointed by the revolutionary government. But I'm telling you, all these rights were reserved to the Pope. It was only the Pope to appoint the religious leaders in France, the bishops, you know. But the revolutionary government took over this responsibility. And to make matters worse, there was grabbing of church land. And this land was distributed to the peasants, among the peasants. Now, at the end of the day, the church and the revolutionary government had issues. Beginning with the first revolutionary government, that is the National Assembly government. There was a belief that maybe the Directorate Government would solve the problems of the church and the revolutionaries, but the Directorate Government did not. So Napoleon campaigned that the moment I take over power, I will, of course he was talking to the soldiers because he was the leader of the, he was the army commander. Now, Napoleon, I'm saying, promised to put right the difference that was between the Directorate Government and the Catholic Church. Now, this promise made Napoleon win mass support. during his coup of 1799. I've talked about the military coup of Brumaire of 1799. In this coup, Napoleon was assisted by his brother Lucien Bonaparte, the president of the Council of 500. I talked about that. And he was also supported by the masses. So he took over power. Why? Because he promised to reconcile the church and the masses. I believe you are getting this information. And indeed, let me tell you, when Napoleon took over power, he came up with what we call the Concordat. The Concordat was, of course, a campaign, a document, of course, written by, or an agreement between Napoleon and the Pope on how Napoleon was going to put right all that had gone wrong between the revolutionaries and the Catholic Church. So, brief, that is what I heard about how the Directorate Government failed to solve the problems and how Napoleon promised to solve these problems. So have you got to that point also?
Yeah.
Yes?
Yes,
Is the
teacher.
point clear? Okay.
Yeah, it's clear.
Okay, good.
Yes, it's clear.
Good. If it's clear, then we have moved over to this other point here. Another contribution of the Directorate Government. There it is. Let me try to go through it. Napoleon also befriended with whom he was passionately in love. Okay. Josephine had useful aristocratic connections, which helped Napoleon's rise to power. He was also a close friend to Abbe Sieyès. Abbe Sieyès was another director. Barassi, a director. Jerome, a director. Okay, let me finish up. We said he was also a close friend to Abbe Sieyès and Lucien Bonaparte, his brother, who was a member of this government and instrumental in his 1799 coup. Yes. We are saying Napoleon was a very wise man. He made friends that were actually beneficial to him. He was a friend to one of the directors, Barras. He went ahead to marry the daughter of this director, Barras, and that daughter of Barras was known as Josephine de Beauharnais. Josephine de Beauharnais. So Napoleon married Josephine de Beauharnais, daughter of Barras, and Josephine de Beauharnais was so much important to Napoleon because she helped Napoleon to make connections with the people who mattered. Okay? We are also talking about Napoleon becoming a friend to Abbe Sieyès. Abbe Sieyès was another director. He was also a friend to his own brother, Lucien Bonaparte, the president of the Council of 500. If I'm to repeat that, I told you the French Parliament was divided into two. It was divided into the Council of Elders and the Council of 500. So the Council of 500 was under the presidency of Lucien Bonaparte. So all these ones helped Napoleon to stage a successful coup d'etat at a place called Brumaire in 1799. I'm talking about a successful coup d'etat. Yes, he was successful. He took over power and he began leading France up to 1815. Have you got to that point?
Yeah, we have.
Okay, good. Okay, good. So we have moved over to this other. Sorry, someone is, I think, asking. Someone was asking a question, but I've not got you. Yes, Blessing, you can ask. Unmute and
Teacher,
ask.
for me, I had some rumors
Mm.
that Josephine was not a daughter to Barras. She was a mistress.
Oh, a mistress.
Yeah.
Well, you see, that was a confusion. Josephine Debbie Hannes was a daughter to Barras. So that was misinformation. And in most cases, such information is got from these so-called VJs, video jokers, those who interpret movies. They are the people that confuse our learners. And I always tell my learners, if you are to watch a movie, an educative movie, please watch a movie that is not interpreted. You understand? So it must have been, anyway, I'm not saying it was coming from there, but I have a belief that it might have come from there. So it is just misinformation.
Okay, sir, thank you.
Okay. You're welcome. So we are moving over to this other point here, which is the Directorate Government also narrowed the franchise by increasing property qualification. This denied many French peasants their rights to vote or be voted to public offices. The government therefore lost its credibility among the masses, hence paving the way for the rise of Napoleon to power. So we are talking about narrowing the franchise. Narrowing the franchise. What am I talking about by narrowing the franchise? We are talking about denying people's right to vote. People were denied their right to vote. That is what we call narrowing the franchise. How? People had to pay money if they were to be allowed to vote. I think it was around 200 francs if one was to be allowed to vote. 200 francs. That was not right. People didn't have that money. So for one to qualify to be an eligible voter, one had to pay money. The moment you do that, you are narrowing the franchise. You are limiting people from voting. You understand? So that was not right. And because that came in, of course, the Directorate Government had to lose its credibility which led to Napoleon's rise to power. So let us look at this other. Now, what we've seen above there, we've been breaking down the contribution of the Directorate Government towards Napoleon's rise to power. Now, you might meet a question of this nature here. To what extent did the weakness of the Directorate Government contribute to the rise of Napoleon to power in France? Now, the moment you meet a question of this nature, of course, it is a question for you to look at the extent to which the Directorate Government contributed, and then you look at other factors, because this question is also two-sided. But again, there is something I'd forgotten to ask you. If you met a question of this nature, to what extent did the weakness of the Directorate Government contribute to Napoleon's rise to power? If you are to introduce, what will you introduce? In your introduction, you talk about the Directorate Government or Napoleon? Someone unmute and tell him. In your introduction, would you talk about the Directorate Government or Napoleon Bonaparte?
For me, I think we first talk about Napoleon, then the Directorate Government comes at the end, but we talk about little things about it.
You are very right. Thank you so much. We do not discuss the factor, we discuss the subject. Here, the subject, here we look at Napoleon because the subject is Napoleon. You understand? And then after looking at Napoleon, you also briefly talk about the Directorate Government, then go ahead and show the examiner how the Directorate Government contributed towards Napoleon's rise to power. You understand? So we are saying the moment you meet this question, talk about Napoleon, then the Directorate Government, introduction, give a stand, tell us the extent to which the Directorate contributed, and then go ahead and look at other factors. Then in between there is what we call a transitional statement. In your transitional statement, tell us the extent to which other factors contributed, and then in your conclusion, emphasize your stand. Emphasize your stand in your conclusion. If you said in your, if you said in your introduction that to a greater extent that directorate contributed, emphasize that in your conclusion. Okay? The moment you deviate from what you said in your introduction, for example, you said in your introduction to a greater extent. Again, of course, we are saying to a greater extent that directorate contributed. And again, in your conclusion, you are saying to a greater extent other factors contributed. No, that is a contradiction. So in your conclusion, emphasize your standing. Have you got that?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good. I can see our time is over, and good enough. This was our last statement. That question you've seen there. We've come to the end of our lesson 2, and we will be picking up from there next week, and we'll look at lesson 3. Have a good day.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes, please.
I was asking a question that.
Yes,
Sorry.
go ahead. Yes, ask. Go ahead and ask. Go ahead and ask. So I think something went. I don't know what has happened.